You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
Judge, all right. But I just wanted to reiterate, we had an objection that was sustained on relevance grounds, and the court confirms that objection, concluding under 403, it's not relevant for purposes of this case.
Judge, based on that ruling, the state would move to strike the question.
All right, the question stricken on that topic won't be allowed.
I would like to talk to you a little bit about Chad Daybell's phone, and I'd like you to refresh my recollection. Okay? Yeah. You made mention that on the 26th, when you were doing the initial welfare check, you followed up with calls to Mr. Daybell. Is that right?
That's right.
And your testimony was that you weren't able to get an answer, or the phone was turned off?
Every time we called, it went straight to voicemail, I believe.
Oh, okay. All right. Did you have an opportunity to go through Mr. Daybell's phone records?
I personally have not, no.
So there's no indication that the phone was ever turned off, was there?
I can't testify to that. I didn't go through his records.
Right. But you can testify that it just went to voicemail.
Correct. I can testify he didn't answer.
Okay. Now, when you searched Lori Vallow's residence, there weren't any clothes in there. In the residence that she had hanging up on hangers, right?
That's correct.
Do you have any information to suggest that she had mailed or shipped her clothes to another location?
No, I don't.
Okay. And then you, at the time, you were aware that Mr. Daybell obviously was married to Ms. Vallow at that point. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is it your allegation that Mr. Daybell left on the 26th or 27th and also tried to avoid contact with law enforcement?
I can't answer why Mr. Daybell left. All I can answer to is I wasn't able to get a hold of him after that date.
Okay, and after that date, did you happen to check credit cards or phone records or anything like that to try to locate him?
Again, sir, I didn't go through Mr. Daybell's phone records.
Okay. Did you gain any information that Mr. Daybell was going on a vacation around the 26th or 27th of the end of the month?
We later learned that Mr. Daybell was in California.
Okay. And later learned that he was in California, and that was about the time of the 28th or 29th of November. Is that right?
I'd have to refer to my notes.
Okay. And were you aware?
Sounds right.
Okay. And again, maybe the coffee's still affecting me. I'll try to slow down, okay? But you're also aware that Mr. Daybell on the 28th being at Knott's Berry Farms, right?
Correct.
And that was a family vacation with his kids, correct?
I can't testify to who was there.
Okay, so Mr. Daybell wasn't fleeing. He was on the 26th or 27th of the month when Lori Vallow's closet was empty. Mr. Daybell was on a family vacation.
I can't testify that he wasn't fleeing. I can testify that I knew he was in California at a later date.
Okay. And you know that later date was the end of November, right?
Close to that date, sir, yes.
Okay. And you know that subsequent to that, then he went on a trip to Hawaii after that, right?
Yes, he was in Hawaii after that.
Right. So if I understand the testimony, Mr. Daybell was at some point after the 26th, went on a planned family vacation at Knott's Berry Farms, right?
I can't testify it was a planned family vacation.
Okay, all right, that's okay. And then subsequent to that, he then went to Hawaii on a trip to Hawaii where there was some contact with you folks, correct?
Yeah, we made contact with Mr. Daybell in Hawaii.
Okay. And how is it that you found it out that he was in Hawaii again? Remind me.
Through tips that came in through our hotlines that we had set up and cell phone data.
And this is just a question, I'm kind of curious. Did maybe you just look at plane records?
Are you asking?
Yeah, I'm asking, did you guys look at?
I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to slow down. Go ahead, I'm sorry, sir.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Did at any time, did you just take the initiative to look at plane records?
So each officer was tasked with different things.
Okay.
We did have an officer that looked through finance financial, and I assume he did look through plane records and credit cards.
Okay. And if Mr. Daybell was flying on a commercial plane or traveling from Boise to Knott's Berry Farm on a commercial plane, in your experience and knowledge of these things, there would have been a record of that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Now, I'm going to switch gears again a little bit, okay? Please forgive me because I just want to make sure I hit all of these subjects. And before we go there, I want to make sure you did get a subpoena from my office, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you've acknowledged that you've accepted that, correct?
Right.
And you were kind enough to contact my office and agree that if I need you to come back, you'll come back at a time that's suitable for both of us. Is that fair?
Yes.
Was there anything else discussed during that phone conversation?
Dates that I couldn't make it back.
Okay, and that was because, and we're not going to get into this to let everybody know, because it's nobody else's business, but you have an obligation of some sort, and I've acknowledged that, and we're going to work on that. Is that fair?
Objection relevance.
Sustained.
Okay. Now, as part of your investigation, and I want to be specific to J.J. Vallow, okay? The last known sign of life was the 22nd. Is that fair?
The
last time that they, someone
life
known.
was September 22nd of 2019.
Right, okay. And the last, at least proof of life for Tylee Ryan was September 8th.
Of 2019.
Of 2019. So I'll do the math in my head if I can. There's 15 days difference between Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow. Is that correct? For the last proof of living or life, respectively.
Roughly.
15 days. You think J.J. died on around the 9th of September, 8th or 9th of September, and Tylee was the 22nd or 23rd. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, as part of the investigation, you looked into where J.J. Vallow was on the 22nd of September, correct?
Correct.
And on the evening of the 22nd of September, he was at Lori Vallow's home.
That's correct.
Okay. And present at that home, staying in that home, were Lori Vallow, correct?
Correct.
At least on the 22nd, J.J. Vallow was there, correct?
That's correct.
Melanie Gibb was there, correct?
Correct.
And David Warwick was there.
Correct.
Okay. And on that evening, they were conducting some sort of a religious podcast, the three of them, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the allegation is that JJ was acting up and went into the hair of Alex Cox.
Correct.
And then Alex took JJ into a separate apartment, correct?
On which day?
On the 22nd?
He took him to apartment 107, correct?
Right. His apartment or whoever was on the lease for that apartment, right?
That's right.
Okay. And then the last time that anybody saw JJ was later that evening, is that fair?
Yes.
And that was when Alex Cox was carrying JJ Vallow into the apartment of Lori, David, and Melanie Gibb, right?
Correct.
We were all staying there together, correct?
That's correct.
And then somewhere at that point, whether it was at that point or subsequent to that evening, or that evening, that's when you believe that JJ Vallow was murdered.
That's correct.
Okay. But the next morning, there were three people in the apartment at that time early in the morning, correct?
Objection foundation.
Well, do you know who was in the apartment early that morning on the 23rd?
Hold on, Mr. Pryor, there's an objection, I need to withdraw it. Sustained.
Do you have any knowledge of who was in the apartment on the 23rd of September, the morning of that morning of 2019?
Yes.
And who was there?
David Warwick, Melanie Gibb, and Lori Vallow.
Okay, and at that point, you believe that J.J. Vallow was already dead?
I can't testify to the time, but I believe he was killed.
Okay, but then within 2 hours later from that morning, you believe that he was buried on Chad Daybell's property, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, okay. You had an occasion to talk with Melanie Gibb and David Warwick, is that right?
That's right.
Now, you did it a couple of times, if I recall, one by phone, right? With Melanie Gibb?
Correct.
And that wasn't recorded, was it?
It was recorded.
It was recorded?
With her attorney?
No. No, I'm talking about a regular phone call with Melanie Gibb, without an attorney.
I don't remember a phone call.
Okay, all right, we're gonna revisit that maybe at another date, but that's fine. But you also went down to Provo, Utah. And I'm going off of memory, but it was Provo, Utah on the 4th of June of 2020, is that right?
Sure.
Now, at that point, you were interviewing both David Warwick and Melanie Gibb about information they had about these allegations, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And who else was there?
Myself, Lieutenant Ball, and Prosecutor Wood.
Okay, so the prosecuting attorney, Mr. Wood, right there,
Yes, sir.
and a lieutenant that you work with and yourself drove down to Provo, Utah.
Correct.
And was there anybody from any local law enforcement there as well?
No.
Okay, now there was an effort to record that conversation, is that right?
Yes, it was recorded.
Okay, was the entire thing recorded?
I believe the very beginning wasn't. The recorder malfunctioned or something happened that was recorded, but the majority of that interview was recorded.
The majority of it was recorded.
That's correct.
So if I represent to you that there was 22 minutes of recording on that interview, does that sound about the length of what the interview was with Melanie Gibb?
No,
It doesn't?
no.
Okay. Would it be helpful if you were able to listen to that recording and view that recording to refresh your recollection?
Refresh my recollection.
About the length of time that recording was?
It should have been longer than 22 minutes.
Okay.
They're longer than 22 minutes.
How long were you there?
Roughly, say about an hour maybe.
Okay. Now, your testimony is that it should have been longer than 21 or 22 minutes, is that right?
That's correct.
Would it surprise you to learn that, well, you don't know exactly how long that interview took place, though, right?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the exact time.
And you don't know the length of the recording itself, is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, and in order to determine that, it would be helpful for you to refresh your recollection by listening to the interview, and it would be able to answer those questions for you. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Your Honor, I'm going to object beyond the scope.
We're way beyond the scope of your direct, counsel, if also the officer's going to review that, and I permit it, of course, it's not going to be in the presence of the jury. So also saying the objection on beyond the scope.
Judge, are you talking about beyond the scope of direct examination?
Yes.
Okay, then officer, we'll revisit that at another time, okay? And we'll leave that for another opportunity when I call you back. Now, on the day that J.J. Vallow was found on June 9th, okay? The pictures and the testimony you showed suggested that he was wearing red pajamas and some Skechers socks, is that right?
Sure.
Okay, do you have a recollection of what J.J. Vallow was wearing based on your investigation when he was carried by Alex Cox from Alex Cox's apartment to the upstairs of Lori Vallow's apartment?
Objection, this calls for hearsay.
It doesn't necessarily call for hearsay. He's wondering what he observed him wearing, if you know, so
Yes,
that's how we're on that ground.
tell me if you know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Do you know whether or not J.J. Vallow was wearing red pajamas when he was carried upstairs by Alex Cox?
Sir, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. And Judge, I think at this point, I'm going to save the rest of my questioning for when I call the officer back in my case in chief, if that's okay.
Very well. You can do that. I'll conclude the cross-examination then. This time we'll begin with redirect from the state. Mr. Wood.
Your Honor, may I be handed State's Exhibit 31? Yes, and State's Exhibit 30. Detective, you testified earlier about when you first met Alec or Chad Daybell.
Correct.
Who was he with?
Alex Cox.
Did he look afraid of Alex Cox?
No.
Alex Cox was Chad Daybell's brother-in-law, correct? When you met him?
That's correct.
Detective, you were asked about your beliefs. Is that fair? In cross-examination, you were asked about your beliefs?
Yes.
Let's talk about your investigation. When you started your investigation, what was the scope of your investigation?
Initially, it was to find the Jeep from Gilbert, Arizona.
And then it expanded, correct?
Correct.
And then what was the scope of your investigation?
To find the whereabouts of JJ and Tylee.
And all this time you're collecting information from various sources.
That's correct.
Your Honor, may I publish State's Exhibit 31?
Yes.
Detective, you were asked about your beliefs, correct?
That's correct.
And you were asked about your beliefs regarding, I'm going to call it the paintball incident. Is that fair?
Yes.
And when I'm talking about that, to your understanding, what am I referring to?
The attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell.
And you testified you don't believe it was a paintball gun.
That's correct.
So why not?
Through our investigation, we learned that Alex Cox was in the area and on the property of Chad Daybell the morning that Tammy Daybell was shot at October 9th. Through Google searches from Homer J. Maximus, which was Alex's Google account, the night that Tammy Daybell was shot, it was a colder evening. And the Google searches were how to make an AR-15 function in cold weather. And without referring to my notes, can I refer to my notes?
Would it refresh your memory to review your notes?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may the witness look at his report.
No objections.
Yes, you can look at it, not to testify from, to refresh your recollections. So once you looked at that, it's down.
On October 8th, the night before we believe Tammy was shot at, Alex is Googling drop yardage from 300 yards to 100 yards, which we assumed when you're shooting a rifle, you're adjusting your sights to your target. That was the night before.
It's up to you.
The morning of the shooting, Alex was on Mr. Daybell's property. We have him driving up and down the road of Mr. Daybell's property and also on the property. Later that evening into the early morning hours of October 10th is when he Googled how to make your AR-15 function in cold weather. So that's why we believe that it wasn't just a paintball gun. We believe that Alex Cox was there to shoot Tammy Daybell.
Okay. I'm going to have you look at this timeline. And as far as you're aware, these dates are accurate, correct?
I'm sorry.
As far as you're aware, these, in pursuant to your investigation, these dates are accurate, correct?
That's correct.
Did the fact that Tammy Daybell died 10 days after that incident have any bearing on whether or not you believed it was a paintball gun?
Yes.
Did the fact that Chad Daybell got married 17 days later have any bearing on your belief whether or not it was a paintball gun?
Yes,
The fact that there were 2 children buried on Chad Daybell's property have any bearing on whether or not you believed it was a paintball gun?
yes,
Did the fact that Lori Vallow's husband died within months of these other deaths have any bearing on your belief of whether or not it was a paintball gun?
absolutely.
And finally, did the fact that Brandon Boudreaux was shot at on October 2nd, 2019 have any bearing on your belief of whether or not it was a paintball gun?
Yes,
And it's your belief that Alex Cox was tied to these events, correct?
that's correct.
And because you were asked about your beliefs, was it your belief that Chad Daybell was tied to these events?
Yes.
Why?
Based on our investigation, the lies that we've been told, the fact that we tried to get a hold of the kid's mother, Lori Vallow, the kid's stepfather, Chad Daybell, their uncle, Alex Cox. We weren't able to get a hold of anybody. We were left in the dark. Based on all those events, that's what our beliefs were as a collectively.
Pursuant to your investigation, you know when Alex Cox died?
December 12th, 2019.
At any time after Alex Cox died, did Mr. Daybell call the Rexburg police to report that there might be dead children located on his property?
No, he didn't.
Did he call the Rexburg police with any concerns that perhaps his wife had been harmed by someone?
No, he didn't.
Did he call the Rexburg police before Alex Cox died to say he might be in danger?
Judge, we're going beyond the scope, but walking to I would ask that it be an opportunity to revisit those issues.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
Okay. Again, so the first time you met Chad Daybell, what was the first thing you asked him when you had an opportunity to speak
Judge,
with
this one
him?
has to be answered.
This is a response to the cross your overruled.
I asked him when the last time he saw JJ Vallow was.
And what did he answer?
In October in apartment 107 with Lori Vallow.
And did you ask for Lori Vallow's phone number?
I did.
And what was his first response?
Judge, this has been asked to be answered.
This is a response to the cross.
Overruled.
His response was he didn't know her cell phone.
Detective, you were asked a little bit about how you do an investigation. Correct?
Correct.
And we spoke about the scope of your investigation in this case.
Correct.
Because your testimony that you followed where the evidence took you in this case.
That's correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Wood.
Judge, there were some issues that were opened up. I'd like the opportunity to revisit this.
There were a few, so I'll allow a limited recross, particularly considering your statement that you're going to recall the witness, so it'll be limited, but if you'd like to, Mr. Pryor, you may.
Detective, there was some testimony about, I'll wait for you to
Thank you.
There was some testimony that you had the whereabouts of Alex Cox on the property of Chad Daybell, and that would have been on the 9th
That's correct.
of October.
Yes,
Do you have a recollection of how long he was there on that property?
I don't.
Okay, and you're basing that knowledge on his phone records and his pings, right?
Correct.
Did you have an occasion to look at all of Alex Cox's whereabouts on that day by way of his phone records, or did you just look at that specific time?
We were more interested in that specific time.
Okay, and you, I gather from your testimony that you didn't look at between 8 and 10 o'clock on the 9th when the paintball incident took place. You didn't look at that time for Alex Cox's whereabouts, did you?
If I remember right, I didn't get his location near the property at that time. There was no location.
Okay. And isn't it true, officer, that you didn't get his location at that time because Alex Cox's phone was pinging in Idaho Falls at that time, several miles away.
I can't testify to that.
Okay. But you know he wasn't on the property by way of all of the metadata. That's the word you used, right? Metadata?
Correct.
By the metadata, Alex Cox wasn't on the Daybell property when Tammy Daybell was shot at with a paintball gun, correct?
No, sir, I can't answer that. I can answer that Alex Cox's cell phone or his device was not on the property.
Okay, and you can also say that his device was on Chad Daybell's property sometime in the morning of the 9th of October, right?
And driving down the roadway in front of the property.
Right. And we don't know who else was on the property on the 9th of October, do we?
I can't testify to who was on the property.
Right. So we don't know if he was there by himself or is he there with other folks, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And when we're talking about you've been on the Daybell property, right? A couple of times.
Yes.
And you took a photo of the car, and we're going to revisit that next time we get together. But it's not 100 yards from the end of the Daybell driveway to the road, is it?
No, sir.
Do you have an idea of how long that driveway is? Could you give me an idea if you know?
I couldn't testify to that.
Is it 50 yards?
No, I would say maybe 30, maybe
30 yards?
20, 30 yards, yeah.
So 60 to 90 feet.
That's my rough guess, yes.
Okay, so if we're looking at a rifle at 300 yards and dropping it down to 100 yards, we don't need 100 yards to get from one end of the Daybell driveway to the other, do we?
What our investigation or our belief was, if you're asking me what my belief is,
No, I'm asking you the distance down the end of the Daybell driveway to the top of the Daybell driveway. That's not 100 yards, right?
well, that's correct.
That's all I have, Judge. Thank you.
Mr. Wood, is the state ready to call its next witness?
Your Honor, will you approach?
Yeah.
Your Honor, may this witness leave the stand?
Oh, I didn't know if we are. You want to sidebar first?
No, we're done.
Okay, well, Lieutenant Garcia, you may go ahead and return down. And because you are still under subpoena, maybe recall, I will admonish you to abide by the court's exclusionary rule. And you're not permitted to review testimony trial between now and the time you return for testimony. If you fail to follow that and follow the trial or observe any testimony, you will not be permitted to testify again. All right. Okay, thank you. All right, counsel, if you'll give me a moment, I want to clarify our record on exhibits admitted through that last witness and make sure the court has a clear record of what came in as it relates to exhibit 34. So we did have a stipulation that on the record here, and for the jurors to know as well, we had, I believe 34 had separate attachments or would be separate exhibits, 34A, B, C, D, and E. Is that what 34 consists of?
Yes, Judge, and the state had stipulated to the admission of all of 34, which included those separate exhibits. They've already been stipulated to.
Okay, and understanding they were stipulated to, still on the record, I'm going to make clear that exhibits 34A, 34B, 34C, 34D, and 34E have all been admitted into the record and are evidence in case. Does the state concur with that?
That sounds accurate, Your Honor.
Okay. Counsel, when we conclude, I'll have you stick around for a minute to also see if we need to further clarify exhibits on the record. At this time, ladies and gentlemen of the jury and those in attendance, I've discussed scheduling here with counsel. We got this trial started and moving along with jury selection a little quicker than anticipated, and the state is at its stage of putting on its case in chief. They're doing their best to line up witnesses to appear here, coming a little sooner than anticipated, and that's the explanation. We are going to go ahead and conclude for today in order to allow the state to have a full day's worth of evidence and testimony beginning on Monday, and then next week we should be on a full slate of Monday through Friday trial. Notice also, as I mentioned previously, that tomorrow is not going to be a day of trial, so As I understand it, the state would request that we then conclude trial for the week and commence again on Monday morning. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state, does defense have an objection to that?
No objection, Judge, thank you.
Okay. So before you leave then, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a pretty long break in between evidence now that you are sworn jurors in the case. And I will again admonish you to please do everything you can to not do anything to learn about the case, investigate the case, look the case up, follow any media in the case. If you do see anything being reported, try to avoid that. Don't talk about the case to anyone else or any of the evidence or facts with anyone, including with each other. You can only do that when you start your deliberations. And when you return on Monday morning, when we'll commence at 8:30 with more evidence, I will be asking the jurors as they return to complete those admonitions and certify under penalty of perjury that you have followed that instruction. So I appreciate you doing that so far. I have confidence you will continue to do that, and thank you for your time and efforts today. That will conclude our trial for today, and we will resume again on Monday with further evidence.
All rise, please.
Thank you. Please be seated. The matter on the Exhibit 34 is the court is referencing the defense trial exhibits, and 34 is listed. It says 34A through E, Alex Cox Google searches in October 2019. There's also a 34F and a 34G through J and a 34K through Y. So I just wanted to make clear what came in the record today that will be admitted. We have 34A through E.
That's correct, Judge. The other ones are yet to come.
Okay.
So, and I'm sorry it was confusing. I tried to do this as plainly as possible and have it all on a thumb drive so that the court can make it easier for the jury. But at this point, it's only A through E. The others have been admitted, Judge. I just haven't referenced them yet.
Okay, and just to be clear, even though admitted or and agreed to be admitted by stipulation, for this record to be accurate and for future reference of the record, each time a new exhibit is referenced, it needs to be just called out on the record so the clerk keeps an accurate list of what exhibits have come in and that those track with the actual exhibits. So I think the system works. We just need to make sure that individually, for example, with that, if there's multiple exhibits within a number, then we outline exactly what came in. That way we make sure the jury doesn't see any evidence they weren't supposed to see and they see all the evidence they are supposed to see. So we'll continue to work on that process as we start next week. Before we conclude today, then, is there anything further from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone in your attendance today, also for following the court's conduct orders. I appreciate it very much, and we'll be recessed for the day.
All rise, please.
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.